Mexico City, April 1993. In a darkened warehouse, a truck rumbles through the night. Men carefully load boxes of jalapeno pepper cans. This isn't just a simple food delivery, it's a Sinaloa Cartel operation, one they've executed successfully before. The driver watches every move. These cans hide something very few people know about, a secret worth millions. The truck rolls north through Mexico, disguised as ordinary food transport. At every checkpoint, the driver presents papers from a legitimate trading company. The cargo finally reaches Tecate, a small town 30 miles from Tijuana, just short of the US border. Everything seems to be going according to plan, until federal authorities suddenly storm the warehouse during unloading. Inside those seemingly innocent cans, agents uncover a staggering haul: 7.3 tons of pure coke, meticulously packaged and hidden among thousands of legitimate goods. The plan was simple: break this massive shipment into smaller portions, have each cross separately in different cars through the Tijuana border, and then regroup everything in a Los Angeles warehouse. In the City of Angels market, the cartels had agreed on a wholesale price of $20,000 per kilo. The seizure of 7.3 tons represented a staggering $146 million loss for the Sinaloa organization and their Colombian partners. This wasn't a minor setback. The Sinaloa group was operating in enemy territory, the territory of the Arellano Felix brothers. They didn't just control Tijuana, they imposed heavy taxes on all traffickers and were steadily extending their hold across the entire state of Baja California. Their influence was enormous. Police, military officials, and politicians were all on their payroll. They dominated one of Mexico's most lucrative smuggling corridors. With their colossal profits, the Arellano Felix brothers had built a veritable empire. 150 properties in Tijuana alone, safe houses, warehouses, hotels, nightclubs, and an organization of 500 people, from low-level lookouts to ruthless hitmen. Only the bravest dared enter their territory without permission. The Sinaloa men did, and they paid the price. Shortly before the seizure, 6 bodies showing signs of torture were dumped along Baja California's highways, some near Tecate. The message was clear. Anyone who uses this corridor without authorization or refuses to pay the tax faces the same consequences. Sinaloa versus Tijuana. The war had only just begun, but business never stops. This seizure of white powder hidden in canned goods won't stop Sinaloa operatives from moving in enemy territory. This operation was just one of many being conducted simultaneously. While some prepare new packaging, other shipments are already moving across the United States. Behind the scenes, a new underground strategy is being put in place to bypass the Arellano brothers in Tijuana. Sinaloa is building a multi-billion-dollar commercial empire that, far from running out of steam, is only just taking off. New York, 2018. An armored convoy pulls up in front of the federal courthouse. Heavily armed agents step out and surround a man of average height. Juan Carlos Ramirez Abadia, known as Chupeta, walks with slow, deliberate steps, his handcuffs catching the light. His gaze sweeps the surroundings with suspicion, a habit formed after decades spent fleeing both enemies and the law. Silence falls over the courtroom as Chupeta approaches the witness stand. His face bears the marks of multiple plastic surgeries, an attempt to evade authorities that now gives him the look of a comic book villain. The former Colombian drug lord is about to testify in a high-profile trial. Under the impassive gaze of the jurors, Chupeta, the man with 1,000 faces, begins to tell his story. His slightly hoarse voice recounts the events from the 1990s, when he first started working with El Chapo and the Sinaloa organization.
I was the leader of a Colombian mafia that went by the name Cartel Norte del Valle, North Valley Cartel.
The prosecutor asks him questions.
What was the business of the North Valley Cartel?
Drug trafficking business.
While you were leader of the North Valley Cartel, how many people were eliminated as a result of orders that you gave?
Approximately 150 people.
From the late 1980s until your arrest in 2007, approximately how many kilos of coke did you transport to the United States?
400,000 kilos of white powder, approximately.
When the drugs that you sold to the United States arrived in Mexico, what would happen to your drugs in Mexico?
They were delivered to Mexican kingpins, particularly those of the Sinaloa group, who then transported them to the United States and delivered them to me.
In the 1990s, Mexico became a strategic corridor for Colombian coke, handling up to 70% of total shipments. This shift was driven directly by increased U.S. surveillance of Caribbean routes. Faced with this obstacle, Colombians formed strong alliances with their Mexican counterparts. El Chapo and the Sinaloa organization established themselves as essential intermediaries. The division of labor was clear. Colombia produced, Mexico transported. However, at this time, the Colombians still controlled final distribution and sales networks on U.S. soil.
Did you meet Mr. Guzman Loera personally?
Yes, over 10 times.
Where did you first hear his name?
I heard it from a Mr. Mayo Zambada at a meeting I had with him in Tijuana, Mexico.
Who's Mayo Zambada?
Mayo Zambada is one of the heads of the Sinaloa Cartel.
The Sinaloa Cartel operates as a federation of independent associates. El Chapo and El Mayo are among its most influential leaders. According to Chupeta's testimony, it was El Mayo Zambada who introduced him to El Chapo, recommending him as a reliable business partner. Their first meeting took place in 1990 in the lobby of a Mexico City hotel. El Chapo was accompanied by his brother Arturo, nicknamed El Pollo, and a lieutenant known as El Gordo. The objective? To negotiate an agreement for El Chapo to take charge of the Colombian merchandise upon its arrival in Mexico and transport it to the United States.
What else did you discuss?
We discussed the airstrips, their locations, and possibly which states in Mexico they were in. We considered sending a pilot to inspect the airstrips so they could be properly identified. We also talked about or made arrangements for the potential arrival times of my planes at these airstrips. And we discussed the number of kilos each plane could carry, depending on the airstrip's location.
Can you explain to the jury why it is that the location of the landing strip would determine the quantity of drugs you would put on the plane?
Because, for example, if the airstrip was in Nayarit, which is further south than, say, the state of Sonora, the distance my planes would have to fly to reach Nayarit would be much shorter than if they had to go to Sonora. Since the flights were shorter, they could carry more white powder because they needed less fuel. The farther away the airstrip was, the more fuel was required, which added weight and left less room for cargo, resulting in fewer kilos of coke.
How were you going to pay El Chapo to transport your product?
I was going to pay him by giving him a percentage of my product. For example, if I sent him 1,000 kilos, he would take 40% to transport it to the United States. 40% of 1,000 kilos is 400 kilos of coke. I would then receive the remaining 60%, meaning 600 kilos in the United States.
How did El Chapo's rate of 40% compare to other traffickers?
Well, I had been paying 37% before my business deal with El Chapo, who was charging 40%, so it was more expensive.
Did Mr. Guzman Loera explain to you why he was charging you a higher percentage than the other traffickers?
He said, "I'm much faster. Give me a chance and you'll see. I'll keep your planes, your product, and your pilot secure. I've got excellent arrangements."
What did you understand that to mean?
Well, that the corruption arrangements he had for receiving the planes were solid and effective, which made me confident about the security of my planes and my pilots. Specifically, when the planes arrived at the Mexican airstrips, they were protected by the federal police. They handled the reception of my planes and the cargo, and on many occasions, they even transported it themselves.
Chupeta emphasizes that without government and police corruption, running a cartel is impossible. The two go hand in hand. He decides to stay in Mexico for a few months to closely monitor operations and study the landing strips. Finally, the first shipment arrives in a city in Sinaloa, Los Mochis.
How long did it take Mr. Guzman Loera to deliver these 4,000 kilos from Los Mochis to your people in Los Angeles?
That was super quick, that I recall. It was less than a week.
Was this expected?
Well, that was the first time that one of the Mexican kingpins delivered the product to me that quickly. I did not expect it to be that quickly.
How much time would the other traffickers take to get your product to Los Angeles?
Sometimes a month or more.
At that time, El Chapo earned the nickname El Rápido, and for good reason. Speed was his competitive advantage. The Tijuana corridor became essential for moving shipments to Los Angeles, the true hub of distribution in the United States. Thanks to its proximity to the border, the wholesale price there was lower than in cities like Chicago or New York. Once it arrived in Los Angeles, the merchandise was transported to New York, where Chupeta's specialized cells received it and flooded the local market. There, he sold the kilo for up to $34,000 wholesale, while his street dealers earned much higher profits at retail. Chupeta reveals a sophisticated business strategy. To increase prices, he temporarily stored his white powder in his New York warehouses, creating an artificial scarcity. Clients, desperate to obtain his product renowned for its quality, agreed to pay top dollar, which further stimulated demand. During the first half of the 1990s, Chupeta claims to have shipped approximately 200 tons of white powder to the Sinaloa group. Of this total, 80 to 90 tons passed through El Chapo's network. According to El Gordo, alleged lieutenant of El Chapo, after the dismantling of a tunnel in Douglas in 1990, El Chapo redirected his investments toward the Tijuana-San Diego-Los Angeles corridor. That's where the ingenious idea was born, to camouflage the white powder in cans of pickled jalapeno peppers. At first, El Chapo thought about buying a pepper factory outright. But his strategist convinced him it was wiser to simply replicate existing canned peppers. They chose the La Comadre brand peppers as their model. The group invested in sophisticated industrial equipment to can the drugs and perfectly reproduce the labels. The counterfeits became undetectable. In a discreet warehouse in Mexico City, the Colombian powder was compressed to fit the dimensions of the cans, then mixed with calibrated sand to exactly match the weight of authentic cans. The attention to detail was remarkable. When authorities shook the cans, the sand produced a sound similar to that of the peppers. Production reached several hundred units per day, all destined for the Los Angeles market. To ensure the operation's success, a logistical network of unprecedented complexity was put in place. The Reynoso family ran a thriving food business in California. In 1992, it ranked 13th among minority-owned businesses in Los Angeles, with reported revenues of $30 million, a true model of Latino entrepreneurial success. But behind this respectable facade, their cross-border import network served as cover for the Sinaloa Cartel's activities. Among their flagship products were La Comadre brand peppers. Their infrastructure was impeccable, a fleet of trucks and a network of warehouses stretching from Mexico to Chicago. El Chapo's group exploited this distribution chain to integrate white powder concealed in fake cans that they packaged themselves. The Colombian merchandise thus crossed the border under the guise of legitimate commerce. The fake cans passed through a warehouse in Tecate near Tijuana, where they were mixed with authentic cans and other food products, all destined for the U.S. market. Business was thriving, but not all Colombian suppliers were convinced by this method. Initially, the Colombian bricks were simply cut up and inserted into the cans. The problem? The merchandise arrived damaged in the United States. The bricks, traditionally rectangular, didn't fit the cylindrical shape of the cans. Faced with this challenge, El Chapo made a specific request to his Colombian suppliers: produce the powder in cylindrical form. Among those who accepted this innovation was Chupeta. He had already expressed dissatisfaction to El Chapo about seeing his merchandise arrive deteriorated. He was paying for intact bricks, not damaged products. To solve this problem, El Chapo sent him precise specifications along with a custom mold, guaranteeing perfect standardization of the packaging.
Did El Chapo ask you to send him the coke in a particular way?
Yes, he gave my people a mold. Between 1991 and 1992, yeah, he asked me to send it to him in cylindrical form, with a weight slightly less than a kilogram.
Although Chupeta's air transport operations were running smoothly, the situation evolved. According to El Gordo, El Chapo's lieutenant, El Chapo maintained a privileged relationship with Calderoni, a high-ranking official in the Mexican Federal Police. This strategic connection proved crucial on several occasions. In 1991, when El Pollo, El Chapo's brother, was arrested in possession of more than $1 million in cash, Calderoni personally orchestrated his release. Beyond this protection, Calderoni served as a top informant for the Sinaloa organization. He briefed them not only on ongoing investigations, but also on the activities of their rivals, most notably the Arellano Felix brothers of Tijuana. He was the one who alerted El Chapo that the U.S. government had deployed an aerial interception system in certain states of Mexico, strongly recommending abandoning air transport in favor of maritime routes, which were considered less risky. According to Chupeta, aerial operations became increasingly dangerous. His planes were regularly chased by U.S. and Colombian air forces. Landings, often perilous, compromised the integrity of the merchandise. Faced with this critical situation, the traffickers rethought their logistical strategy. In 1992, they made a major transition to maritime transport, now using fishing boats as cover.
Was there a change in the arrangements with El Chapo?
Indeed, El Chapo told me that now his profit percentage on my product shipped by boat would be 45%.
This increase is due to the rising bribes paid to authorities to maintain operations. Chupeta accepts the situation, but El Chapo tells him he needs to consult with his other associates. That's how a prison visit is arranged to get the opinion of the man known as El Azul.
El Azul was a man who was a member of the Sinaloa Cartel, who was like a godfather, someone who is very much respected by the other drug lords and whose opinions are listened to, and who also has the role as a mediator to mediate the problems that come up amongst the bosses of the cartel. And, in general, that is a person who has a lot of contacts, a lot of corruption contacts in the police, in politics.
How did you get to the prison?
By car. I was accompanied by a federal police commander who worked for the Sinaloa organization. When we arrived at the prison, there were no searches, we didn't show any documents, and there were no security checks.
Did you notice anything unusual in the prison?
Well, El Azul controlled the prison. I saw whiskey, marijuana, weapons, unlimited food.
Aware of the DEA's increased surveillance, El Azul validates the transition to different maritime routes. According to Chupeta's testimony, this crucial meeting brings together several major figures from the Mexican underworld: El Chapo, El Mayo, and Amaro Carrillo Fuentes. The latter, considered one of the most influential, occupies a strategic dual position. He is both an essential partner of the Sinaloans and leader of the Juarez Cartel, alongside Rafael Aguilar Guajardo. We'll come back to him a bit later. This complex alliance perfectly illustrates the structure of the Sinaloa Cartel. Although each leader manages their own operations and pursues their specific business interests, they share resources, personnel, and investments. The Sinaloa Group therefore functions not under the authority of a single boss, but as a consortium of several leaders, each bringing their particular expertise. El Chapo then directs his operations towards the Guerrero coast, a strategic region home to the famous beach resort of Acapulco. This choice isn't random. This area remains under the control of his distant cousins, the Beltran Leyva brothers, led by the one they call El Barbas. These trusted allies ensure the secure reception of shipments on the coast before they're transported to the main distribution centers, particularly Mexico City. It is in this capital that the product is processed, including packaging in the now famous pickled jalapeno cans. Once packaged, the merchandise heads towards Tijuana via Tecate, the final stop before entering the United States. This period proves especially dangerous. The Arellano Felix brothers, who consider Tijuana their exclusive territory, demand a toll for any shipment crossing their turf.
Tijuana is the most used port on the border, and everyone wants a piece of it. The Arellanos insist the Northwest is theirs, and no one's going to operate there without going through them. Guzman is arrogant. No one's going to tell him what to do. The Arellanos survive not because they're smarter, but because they're more violent.
Faced with this territorial conflict, El Chapo devises an ingenious solution. At the heart of his plan, the Reynoso family's food products company. This legitimate front has just acquired a strategic warehouse for $1.1 million in Ote Mesa, an industrial zone in San Diego located just beyond the border checkpoint. The location is perfect. The first point of access to the United States after customs inspections, ideal for discreetly receiving illicit goods. The official project? Converting the warehouse into a cannery. But that's only the visible part of the operation. Simultaneously, El Chapo launches major renovation work in a warehouse on the Mexican side of the border in Tijuana near the airport. This supposed rehabilitation conceals a massive project: the excavation of a sophisticated tunnel over 1,000 feet long to directly connect the two properties. Workers are already digging 60 feet underground. Several months of work will be necessary to reach the other side, but this underground infrastructure will become an invisible highway for transporting the white powder, completely bypassing border controls. As business thrives, the conflict between the Arellano Felix brothers and the Sinaloa Cartel, notably El Chapo and his friend Hector Palma, is about to explode for real. In this world, everyone knows each other. Everyone understands that conflicts are bad for business. El Mayo, a key leader in Sinaloa, seeks to avoid any confrontation with the Arellano Felix brothers from Tijuana. Despite years of collaboration, he finds himself caught between two sides: El Chapo on one end, the Tijuana leadership on the other. Each camp blames the other for the tensions. The problem stems primarily from Ramon, one of the brothers known for his unpredictable violence. Benjamin, the real boss, keeps his feet more firmly on the ground. This dynamic allows for the regular establishment of temporary truces that ease tensions and let business thrive. During this period, attacks mainly target the workforce and lower-ranking collaborators rather than the leaders themselves. This strategy disrupts the adversary's operations while avoiding a direct escalation that would compromise everyone's business. Everything changes in November 1992. Ramon and his team head to Guadalajara after locating El Chapo. Benjamin, his brother, worries about this move, fearing an escalation of the conflict. But Ramon, stubborn, has only one thing on his mind: eliminating El Chapo. El Chapo is driving peacefully through the streets of Guadalajara in his black car in the early afternoon when a Ram pickup violently rams into him. Several armed men get out and open fire on his vehicle in broad daylight. Miraculously, El Chapo manages to escape. He claims to recognize Ramon among his attackers. Once safe, furious, he immediately contacts Benjamin to confront him about the attack, but Benjamin denies any involvement. Vicentillo, El Mayo's son and privileged witness to these rivalries, writes in his diary,
After making peace, and sometime later, my father and my compadre Amado Carrillo Fuentes found out that Ramon had wanted to eliminate my compadre Chapo. My father was really upset because he found himself caught in the middle of all this.
Then comes the most significant episode of this war: a party at a nightclub in Puerto Vallarta, a tourist paradise located a few hours' drive from Guadalajara. The perfect place to vacation and unwind. The Tijuana men have taken refuge there, waiting for the situation at the border to calm down. According to the renowned journalist Blanco Ornelas, it is El Mayo who invites Benjamin and his brothers to a party in Puerto Vallarta's hotel zone, even with tensions running high. But at the last minute, he warns them that an unexpected professional matter prevents him from coming. Benjamin, annoyed, decides to stay at the hotel. His two brothers, Ramon and Francisco Javier, go out to party anyway, accompanied by their personal security and corrupt police officers serving as bodyguards. But El Mayo passes the information to his friend El Chapo, who then sets up an ambush.
According to the information that my compadre Chapo and El Güero Palma had, all the Arellano Felix brothers were supposed to be in a nightclub in Puerto Vallarta, and my compadre Chapo and El Güero Palma had sent their men to execute them.
A commando of 40 men storms the nightclub. Some pose as police officers to neutralize security, while others enter the establishment directly. Inside, the situation quickly degenerates into a shootout. Gunfire erupts from all directions, causing panic among the customers. Despite several deaths and injuries, the operation fails. Ramon manages to escape by climbing through the bathroom ceiling and fleeing through an emergency exit. According to some sources, Francisco Javier, the younger brother who had recently been studying at the University of Guadalajara, was captured during the attack. The Sinaloa men ultimately released him, determining he wasn't involved in the conflict and that they were looking for his brother, Ramon.
Later, I was with my father when my compadre Amado called him. He told him that Benjamin had called and accused Chapo and even my father of trying to liquidate him in a nightclub in Puerto Vallarta.
Whatever versions of the facts may be true, this episode marks a point of no return, particularly for El Mayo, who now finds himself openly involved in the conflict. Benjamin and Ramon aren't fooled. They know that El Chapo doesn't have the power to make such a decision alone. Behind all of this is El Mayo. Everything happened with his approval. Rey, El Mayo's brother, confirms that Mayo was aware of the plans to eliminate Ramon. He regretted that they hadn't succeeded because Ramon was a very dangerous enemy. The Arellano Felix brothers returned to Tijuana to reconsolidate their forces and prepare their offensive. East of Tijuana lies another strategic corridor, the Juarez-El Paso crossing connecting Mexico to Texas. The location is ideal. In 1994, more than 16 million vehicles crossed the bridge between the two countries. Less than 10% undergo detailed inspections. As one customs officer described it, if they checked every car, the line would stretch all the way to Mexico City. This plaza, one of the most lucrative in Mexico, is controlled by Rafael Aguilar Guajardo, who shares power with Amado. The latter is experiencing a meteoric rise thanks to his partnerships with the Medellin and later Cali cartels, propelling his organization toward unprecedented expansion. Amado, a meticulous and cautious man in his 30s, favors negotiation over conflict. His entrepreneurial approach has allowed him to build a vast network of contacts over more than a decade. This reputation earns him Rafael's trust, who entrusts him with logistics management and receiving Colombian merchandise. Until then, Amado had preserved his most precious asset, anonymity. Virtually unknown, he moves freely by corrupting high-ranking officials. Conversely, Rafael attracts all the spotlight with his extravagant style. He spends his time on yachts in Acapulco and in luxurious pools. According to a DEA agent, he also benefits from considerable protection in Juarez.
Rafael Aguilar probably has a lot more people working for him than the police have working for them.
While his competitors were transporting a few hundred kilos via light aircraft, Amado operated on an industrial scale. He moved up to 10 tons of white powder in a single trip. He was operating in a different dimension. The massive shipments from the Cali cartel transited primarily through his strategic base in Juarez. His partner Rafael, satisfied with this success, rested on his laurels. Amado excelled in the art of diplomacy and negotiation. His strategy: forged strategic alliances with various groups operating along the border from Juarez to Tijuana. This collaborative approach offered concrete advantages. It allowed them to obtain preferential rates from Colombian suppliers through collective buying power. Amado also made his impressive air fleet available for logistics, creating a win-win situation for all partners. True to his philosophy of peaceful conflict resolution, he personally traveled to Tijuana to attempt to mediate between the Arellano Felix brothers and his friends from Sinaloa. In January 1993, 2 months after the Puerto Vallarta incident, Vicentillo, El Mayo's son, attends a party at a nightclub in Tijuana. A meeting follows with Benjamin and Amado, who brings Vicentillo along with him.
I was there. I was with my compadre Amado, and he told me that we were going to see Benjamin because there was already a problem between them and my father. Amado indicated to me that I should stay close to him and not worry. That same night, my compadre Mano and we went to the meeting with the Arellano Felix brothers. We saw them in one of their hideouts. When we arrived, there were many armed men, and Benjamin Arellano was already waiting for us. When Benjamin greeted Amado, he realized I was by his side. He was surprised and asked me, "What are you doing here?" Amado replied, "He's with me. He's not doing anything here, he's just with me." We entered the house. They went into the living room and I stayed in the kitchen. Ramon wasn't there. Benjamin and Amado called me into the living room where they were. When I entered, they were talking about a person named Rafael Aguilar Guajardo, and saying that Rafael Aguilar Guajardo wanted to eliminate my father. Benjamin asked my compadre to ally with them, with the Arellano Felix brothers, to get rid of my compadre Chapo and my father. Amado said, "I know you have a problem with Chapo, but you brought it on yourselves, and that one of the reasons that he was there in Tijuana to speak on behalf of my father, to say that he didn't want any problems, and that if he wanted to kill my father, they would have to kill him first." The situation became tense. I was present, and at one point, Benjamin started shouting in my face, telling me that he was going to eliminate my father. He said, with many insults, that he was going to kill Chapo and Hector Palma too. "Chapo and your father will regret having tried to eliminate us in the nightclub." I simply looked at him. I had nothing to do with that. The meeting ended around 1 or 2 in the morning. We left the house and my compadre Amado said it would be better if we leave right away. Without even going back to get our belongings at the hotel, we went to the airport.
They fly directly from Tijuana. Amado doesn't trust Ramon. He's certain Ramon had the house under surveillance and could have acted against them. Back in Sinaloa, Vicentillo tells his father, El Mayo, what happened. El Mayo tells him not to worry and not to pay it any mind. A crucial element of Vicentillo's testimony concerns Rafael, who had agreed to eliminate El Mayo and El Chapo. The Tijuana organization, by allying with Rafael and his Juarez cartel, could have controlled the most strategic border corridors, creating a genuine monopoly. Faced with this situation, Amado has to make a choice. With his ambitions for power, his decision is quickly made. In April 1993, Rafael is liquidated in Cancun. Amado becomes the natural heir to the Juarez cartel, crossing a decisive threshold. He's now on track to potentially become the most powerful drug lord in Mexican history. He won't hesitate to eliminate anyone who stands in the way of his rise. In criminal circles, the rumor persists. Rafael's execution was orchestrated by Amado himself. However, in addition to that, an FBI report from the time cites a DEA agent's hypothesis that El Chapo might also have taken part in the hit. Let's go back to El Chapo. A few weeks later, the jalapeno can operation collapses when Mexican police intercept a truck. The white powder, carefully concealed, will never reach the streets of Los Angeles. The hoped-for $146 million evaporates in an instant. According to the arrangement with Chupeta, the Sinaloa team was supposed to receive 45% of that sum, about $65 million, a fortune now out of reach. After the confiscation, Chupeta demands proof that authorities actually seized the coke and that it wasn't stolen. El Pollo, El Chapo's brother, must provide official documents attesting to the seizure to dispel any suspicion. Despite this setback, activities don't slow down. Beneath the US-Mexico border, the famous Tijuana Tunnel nears completion. Already over 1,300 feet dug, with lighting and ventilation installed. Workers are preparing to break through the surface on the American side to emerge in the warehouse that will serve as the reception point. El Chapo's organization experiences explosive growth. In 1987, only 25 people worked under his command. According to his lieutenant, El Gordo, that number had surged to nearly 200 by 1993. A master at forging alliances, El Chapo surrounds himself with soldiers of unwavering loyalty. But the Tijuana organization doesn't remain idle and doesn't hesitate to recruit gangsters from San Diego. Remember the nightclub shooting in Puerto Vallarta? David Barron, Ramon's head of security, had shown remarkable vigilance. Noticing the arrival of Sinaloa men disguised as police officers, he had immediately sensed danger. Thanks to his quick reaction, Ramon had been able to escape unharmed. This anticipation proved crucial to his boss's survival and earned him his absolute trust. Shortly after his return to Tijuana, Benjamin summons Barron and asks him to recruit strong, reliable men to protect his brothers and himself. Unlike their usual practice of employing narco juniors, young men from wealthy families, the Arellano brothers this time need real, hardened gangsters. To find them, they have to cross the border. Barron grew up in the impoverished neighborhoods of San Diego, where he is already an influential figure within a local gang. He quickly mobilizes his network and recruits men from marginalized areas like Logan Heights and Barrio Logan, known for their street gangs. Members of these American gangs are immediately integrated as bodyguards and hitmen. They undergo intensive training while staying on alert, ready to capture members of the Sinaloa organization. Each shooter receives a weekly salary of $500, not counting the substantial bonuses for each mission completed.
Regularly, the hitmen and I received formal training in firearms handling. This training consisted of shooting and timing exercises. After these exercises, David Barone and our firearms instructor, a man from the Middle East, would evaluate and critique our performance.
Thus forms a full-time strike force. This marks a turning point in the history of Mexican cartels. For the first time, they recruit outsiders solely for their capacity for violence, creating a true armed wing. On May 18, 1993, the Arellano Felix brothers receive crucial intelligence. Their sworn enemies, El Chapo and likely Hector Palma, are reportedly in Guadalajara. The Tijuana strike force immediately deploys to locate their targets. They establish an operational headquarters near downtown. The safe house serves as both an arsenal and a base to coordinate their daily patrols. Their informants have reported that El Chapo frequently drives a recent white Grand Marquis. Despite meticulous searches, the men return empty-handed each night. Their efforts seem futile. A few days later, Ramon announces the mission is being abandoned. Neither El Chapo nor Hector Palma are in Guadalajara. He orders his men to buy plane tickets and head to the airport to return to Tijuana. Some members are frustrated. They had been promised up to $30,000 if they managed to capture El Chapo. About 10 people arrive at the airport in separate groups, with their 5 armored vehicles loaded with weapons. This is when the story gets complicated. Coincidence or not, after 1 week of surveillance, the Tijuana men decide to leave the city on the very same day as El Chapo. El Chapo arrives at the airport in an armored vehicle accompanied by his bodyguards. He wants to catch a flight to Puerto Vallarta and enjoy the beach. He parks near the terminal entrance. A second escort vehicle positions itself right behind. The moment he steps out of the car, chaos erupts. Gunfire rings out. His bodyguard spots several armed individuals emerging from nearby vehicles and opening fire in their direction. The scene lasts no more than 30 seconds. Acting on instinct, El Chapo throws himself to the ground and crawls toward the terminal to escape the gunfire. He makes his way to the baggage claim area. From there, he and his bodyguard reach the runway and flee across the fields, taking advantage of the confusion. But the incident doesn't end there. Not far from El Chapo's armored vehicle, a white Grand Marquis is parked with an important passenger inside, Mr. Posadas, the Cardinal of Guadalajara, an influential figure in the Mexican Catholic Church. He has just been killed in the gunfire. According to the first official version, the prosecutor claims that the Cardinal was caught in crossfire between 2 rival gangs who clashed at the Guadalajara airport, an incident that cost the lives of 7 people in total. The prosecutor quickly revised his version of events. Moments after the Cardinal arrived with his driver, armed men emerged, surrounded their car, and opened fire directly at them. The forensic report later contradicted the crossfire theory. The 14 bullets that struck the Cardinal had been fired at point-blank range.
Es cuando gente armada, a menos de 1 metro de distancia, le dispara en su cuerpo. Él tiene 14 balazos en el cuerpo.
When the shooters realized what had happened, it was already too late. According to the most widely accepted official version today, the gunmen mistook the Cardinal for El Chapo. Their surveillance had led them to look for a white Grand Marquis, the exact same model the Cardinal was driving. That similarity, combined with the fact that both men were dressed in black that day, led to the fatal mix-up. Many Catholic Church leaders rejected this theory. According to them, it was a deliberate state crime, orchestrated at the highest levels of government as part of a targeted operation. Senior political officials allegedly wanted to silence the Cardinal because of what he knew about their corruption and ties to the cartels. He had reportedly been threatened, wiretapped, and surveilled for a long time. Whatever the truth, there are countless books, testimonies, and conflicting accounts. What matters for our story is that from this moment on, El Chapo became the most wanted man in Mexico. After the airport shooting, part of the Tijuana gang managed to board an Aeromexico flight. Despite the airport supposedly being shut down by authorities, the plane took off anyway, with a 20-minute delay. According to FBI documents, brothers Ramon and Francisco Javier Arellano Felix were on that flight to Tijuana, accompanied by 6 other men, most of them from San Diego. Once they landed, none of them were arrested. It appears cars were already waiting on the runway to pick up the team. Those who couldn't board in Guadalajara were eventually arrested by authorities. They stated that they had come to the city under orders from the Arellano Felix brothers to hunt down El Chapo. They also testified about his role in the shooting and the fatal mistake involving the Cardinal. One member of the Tijuana group revealed the location of the safe house used in the days before the ambush, the same place where weapons were stored. Decades later, El Chapo offered his own version of events in a letter. He claimed the Mexican government made him the perfect scapegoat for the Cardinal's assassination. According to him, he was simply leaving for vacation in Puerto Vallarta when he suddenly found himself caught in the middle of a shootout. After parking his car at the airport, he was unloading his luggage from the trunk when the gunfire broke out. Panicking, he ran for cover, leaving behind his belongings and identification papers. The authorities took advantage of the situation, using those documents to accuse him and quickly present the public with a convenient culprit. Until that moment, the Mexican public knew almost nothing about El Chapo. He had appeared in a few crime reports, but nothing major. Overnight, his face was splashed across TV screens and newspapers nationwide, marking the beginning of his notoriety. Although authorities were pursuing several suspects, it was El Chapo's image that both the Mexican and U.S. governments amplified most. It became so omnipresent that public outrage demanded his immediate capture, shocked that he was still on the loose. El Chapo claims that in record time, he became public enemy number 1. While law enforcement actively searched for El Chapo, numerous raids were carried out on his hideouts. During one of them in Tijuana, authorities uncovered a piece of evidence, a detailed map of San Diego. That map led investigators to a sophisticated tunnel that El Chapo was close to completing. During the dismantling of the operation, an intriguing detail emerged. The workers had made a critical miscalculation. On the map, the American warehouse was marked as being 1,416 feet from the tunnel's entrance on the Tijuana side, so they had dug exactly that distance. But in reality, the warehouse was farther away. They still needed another 120 feet to reach their destination. Believing they were directly beneath the warehouse, the workers had already started digging upward, unaware of their mistake. In Tijuana, law enforcement located the tunnel entrance by methodically hammering the concrete floor. They uncovered a hidden trapdoor equipped with a ladder. Investigators estimated that about 20 people were working full-time on this secret construction project. The tunnel's design closely mirrored that of the first one attributed to El Chapo years earlier, connecting Agua Prieta and Douglas. But this new underground passage took things to a whole new level, both in size and sophistication.
The Tijuana Tunnel is almost 5 times as long as the Douglas Tunnel. I was impressed by the Douglas Tunnel, but this one here is the Taj Mahal of tunnels.
If the operation had succeeded, they would have flooded the U.S. market with Colombian powder.
The border location would have provided perfect cover for a high-volume drug shipping operation. On the U.S. side, there are a lot of warehouses. There are trucks coming and going at all hours of the day and night. It would raise the least amount of suspicion for trucks to be coming and going at 2 in the morning. It would have looked like business as usual.
One month before the Guadalajara airport shootout, El Chapo was trying to establish a new strategic hub for his organization in El Salvador. He arrived there in April 1993 to build a logistics base meant to streamline the transport of shipments from Colombia. During his stay, El Chapo held several meetings with local contacts to set up his network. What he didn't know was that some of these contacts were actually undercover Salvadoran agents assigned to monitor his movements. In a local bar, those agents even managed to photograph El Chapo enjoying himself in a laid-back setting, proof of his presence in the country. El Chapo didn't stay long in El Salvador. After quickly putting his network in place, he returned to Mexico. Meanwhile, Salvadoran authorities, working closely with the DEA, were carefully building their case. Their plan was clear: arrest him in the act during his next trip, when he came to receive a Colombian shipment, and then extradite him to the United States. But that plan would never come to pass. After the Guadalajara shootout, the situation in Mexico became extremely dangerous for El Chapo. The Mexican government, under heavy international pressure, doubled its efforts to capture him and show results. El Chapo then fled to Guatemala, where he had paid hefty bribes to secure protection. Despite those precautions, his days were numbered.
Empieza a usar tarjetas de débito y bueno, se va ratificando que va rumbo al sur, va a cruzar la frontera.
Sabíamos en qué vehículos estaban desplazando, de cuántos venían, todos los vehículos venían armados.
Guzmán se hospedó en un hotel de la ciudad. Pérez montó una operación para su captura al enterarse de que se dirigía a El Salvador.
Authorities set up a strategic checkpoint and proceed with his arrest on June 9, 1993. Notably, neither El Chapo nor his bodyguards offers any resistance. His reaction remains remarkably composed. He shows no fear, nervousness, or aggression. In a desperate attempt to negotiate his freedom, El Chapo reveals that he is heading to El Salvador to pick up a major shipment at a local port. However, this strategic confession isn't enough to sway the Guatemalan authorities, who ultimately hand him over to Mexican officials. Despite their disappointment at not having captured El Chapo themselves, Salvadoran authorities carry out an operation the following day that destroys nearly 6 tons of white powder and dismantles his network. This investigation generates several leads that later help build cases against certain members of El Chapo's inner circle. This is particularly true for his lieutenant, El Gordo, who is arrested years later and eventually becomes a witness under judicial protection.
En las horas de la noche, los militares iniciaron el envío del Chapo a México por tierra.
Back to El Chapo. He lands in Mexico and is immediately transferred to prison.
¿Pero usted se dedica a las drogas? ¿A qué se dedica?
Yo soy agricultor.
Oficial.
Maíz, frijol.
Maíz y frijol. ¿Para qué quiere las armas?
Presented to cameras around the world, his luck doesn't abandon him. He already knows he'll be back. El Chapo knew how to surround himself with the right people. His brother Arturo El Pollo and his distant cousins, the Beltran Leyva brothers, including El Barbas, take over his operations. Chupeta himself confirms that they are the ones who will repay the debts accumulated by El Chapo following the seizure of shipments. As for Amado Carrillo Fuentes, he becomes a legendary figure in the underworld. According to certain sources, he allegedly provided intelligence on El Chapo's location himself, explaining the speed of his arrest. This maneuver can be explained by the fact that El Chapo was attracting too much attention to their operations because of his conflicts with the men of Tijuana. Amado, more than anyone, knew that flourishing business requires discretion and anonymity. Nevertheless, this betrayal theory has never been proven. Their respective groups maintained their partnership afterward, and the Sinaloa men largely benefited from the profits generated by Amado's cartel. During the same period, an important event occurred. An arrest warrant was issued against Calderoni, the corrupt high-ranking police official. He anticipated the situation and packed his bags, heading to the United States, where he was nevertheless arrested by Interpol and the FBI. Although subject to extradition proceedings to Mexico, he obtained a residence permit in Texas and became a protected asset of the DEA, which used his information in several trials. Calderone then devoted himself to divulging details about the cartels and their government alliances, directly accusing the president at the time of complicity and protection toward the narcos. He betrayed too many people and made himself a long list of enemies. In this world, betrayal always comes with a price, and it's a very high one. They say he talked when he should have kept quiet. On February 5, 2003, in McAllen, Texas, he was executed in his Mercedes while leaving a meeting with his lawyer. In this world, no one is spared. The Arellano brothers would soon understand this.